We're now joined by the sitting governor of the state of New Jersey, a senior advisor to Donald Trump and a surrogate for Donald Trump, Christie. Governor, how do you think your guy did?
Listen, Brian, tonight what you saw was if the American people want the same thing they've had for the last 8 years, if they want a pre-programmed professional politician who can memorize sound bites, then they got their candidate. They should vote for Hillary Clinton. If they want to change what's going on in Washington, if they want to change what's going on in the country, they cannot vote for the same old thing. And I think that's what you saw tonight, something very different versus the same old thing.
I guess the problem people are having with it is the stakes here. As Steve Schmidt said, not given to hyperbole, especially against fellow Republicans. He called the second half of it absolute incoherence, especially the part on national security. Would you advise Donald Trump to change his narrative, his approach on things like his birtherism answer, on things like his tax returns, the areas where he showed the most vulnerability tonight?
Well, first of all, Brian, I think he was very clear, as he has been all along on the tax returns. Mrs. Clinton may not like the answer, but the answer is he's followed the advice of his lawyers and his accountants, and when the audit is done, he'll release his tax returns. Now, she doesn't like that answer, and she likes to make hay out of it, but you also notice that when he talked about deleting 33,000 emails, Mrs. Clinton never answered that, and Lester Holt didn't hold her to account for it. So the fact is that, you got to look at these answers on both ends. There's lots of things Mrs. Clinton didn't want to talk about tonight either. And so as far as incoherence in the second half of the debate, I think the only thing I suggest is he doesn't call Steve Schmidt, because obviously Steve doesn't like what was said.
Let me ask it another way. You would change nothing about your guy's delivery, tone, tenor, content, behavior?
Now, listen, I think you can always improve. You can always do better. And I think in every one of these ways, listen, nobody liked President Obama's performance 4 years ago in the first debate. I remember. And he was getting knocked all over the place by his own party for his performance in the first debate. And then the second debate, you saw a difference. I would always go back and look at these debates as a candidate and as an advisor to a candidate and say, how can we improve? How can we do better? That's why they don't only have one of these, they have three of them. And so the fact is, John Podesta, sitting here in the camp of wishful thinking that Donald Trump won't show up for the next two debates. If Donald Trump didn't show up for the next two debates, Hillary Clinton still wouldn't win.
We're going to hold you to that prediction. Devil's advocate, the people who had problems with previous presidential debates at this level of play didn't have problems with lies being told and didn't have... We've got fact-checking memos we will get around to reading on the air, but page after page after page, the likes of which we haven't seen. And our immediate reaction was that was two wholly different conversations taking place, both on live television and a split screen.
Well, Brian, listen, if we're going to rely all the time on the fact checkers, who also have an agenda, then we can discuss that as well. But what we also know is that Mrs. Clinton wasn't answering a lot of the questions that she was uncomfortable with tonight. She wasn't addressing some of it. I sat there and listened, and there were some questions she answered. There were many questions that she didn't answer. Now, that's a fact check problem or that's an honesty problem. Listen, the American people can make a decision here. Decision's got to be, if they're going to worry about whether Donald Trump got one or two facts wrong tonight, which I'm sure he must have, and I'm sure Mrs. Clinton got a few wrong herself. But when she's made the mistakes, she's made those mistakes in office, which have cost the American people dearly. And let's judge her performance not only on a debate stage, but when she had the reins of power in her hand. And I think that's something that the American people are going to consider much more than whatever happens in any of this debate or the next two that come.
Advisor to Donald Trump, sitting governor of New Jersey, Christie. Thank you, Governor, very much for joining us in these first minutes after the debate.
Brian, thanks for having me. Appreciate it very much.
We're going to bring in our own friend Chuck Todd from Meet the Press to get Chuck's first take on this here with us on MSNBC tonight.